Okay, so we are going over the shift book today. I gave us quite the chunk to try to cover from pages 170 to 270, which is pretty much finishing off the rest of the book. We're not going to cover all of that. What I really wanted to focus our discussion on today is this transition into the buyer's market and how we can be effective as agents to really help our clients, because what we're seeing in a buyer's market, as I'm sure some of you guys can attest to, is that our buyers are scared to buy right now. Can anybody sign off on that or share any experiences that you've had?
I have a client that I've had for the past 6 or 7 months, and she's like, "Oh, rates are bad and blah blah blah." I said, "Well, the rates aren't going to get any better. Especially you're being very particular about where you want to live. You might as well go ahead now, because they think that the rates are going to go down somehow, magically." I said, "They're not. And you need to be careful. Of course, keep in mind, but it doesn't. Waiting is not going to make it better. It's going to make it worse, actually."
And that's honestly very true when it comes to this market. We're always going to see our rates fluctuate, and the one thing that they point out in this book, and when somebody says that they're waiting for the rates to go down, just be like, remind them of why they are trying to buy. We as agents, we really want to hone in and focus in on our buyer consultation. So during the seller's market, which a lot of you got your license during that time, it was a high seller's market. So it was a very high rush pace, go, 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 get them in front of the house, write them a ridiculous offer in hopes that they win, and not necessarily honing in on what it is that they wanted, because the desire to buy with those low interest rates was outweighing what they were actually looking for in most cases. So now we're going to have to take time out to really hone in and perfect our buyer consultation and really zone in on why they're looking to buy. Is it because they need bigger space, or are they downsizing? Is it because they're trying to expand their family? Is it because they need to be closer to their job? Is it because they're tired of renting? Really trying to figure out their reasons to buy is going to help you navigate the high interest rates, because in reality, our interest rates now are what they were 4 or 5 years ago, but we don't know if they're going to continue to climb. So sometimes presenting that fear, can you afford to wait for the interest rates to go back down? Because none of us know when that's going to be. None of us know if we will ever see 3% again, because that was literally a gift in the first place. So your desire to buy and your reasons to buy, can you afford to continue to wait? And hopefully by, narrowing down what it is that they're looking for and why they're looking to move will help us move forward with that conversation. Because the interest rates are buy the house, date the interest rate, right? Marry the house, right? Donnie, were you saying something? I kind of heard you cutting in and out.
Oh, sorry. No, you pretty much just took the words right out of my mouth. I just literally had 2 clients that I had to literally have a sit down, and sometimes you have to be more than a real estate agent. Sometimes you have to be a financial advisor as well. Sometimes, talk about how much are you able to spend right now on a mortgage? Say if we was able to close you right now, how much are you willing to spend this much on a mortgage? Then you compare that with renting. So, and the way I'm doing, I'm blunt with it. I'm like, so you rather pay $2,500 of somebody else's mortgage instead of paying $2,500 of your own mortgage. I'm like, so would you rather put money into your own pocket eventually, or you just want to keep putting money into those people's pocket that you're paying for? Sometimes you do have to be a little bit blunt with them and just tell them directly, yes, interest rates are high, but if you're able to afford it, just like you said, Holly, date the rate and marry the house. So hopefully when the rate does go down, then you can explain to them, just jump on the refinance, just quickly refinance and get that lower rate. So that's where that's what I've been telling my clients, and it's been helping. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You know, it's just got to be a little bit of an expert for them too as well.
Exactly. And letting them remember that, they're paying somebody else's mortgage, especially if they are renting, is always going to be a win in my book. Cause I'm like, you're paying this money no matter what. Do you want to actually be paying something that's yours and having to follow their rules and their restrictions? Or do you want to really be investing in yourself and in your future? And that's always a very good point. Samantha, what have you been seeing with your buyers? Because I know you're working with them as well.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of my buyers, we've had issues as far as like rates jumping from the day we put an offer in to the next day when it gets ratified.
Yes.
So just, having those, my lenders have been really good about having those conversations with them. Like, this is what's happening. They've been really good also just about, hey, like, if you do this down payment versus that down payment. Most of my buyers right now are investors. I don't have any first-time buyers right now, but so for them, they have a little more cash in their pocket to put 25% instead of 20% down, which is making a huge difference in what their payment looks like. So just really, I just have been referring everybody back to the lender. I'm like, I don't even know what, speaking of which, actually, I need to pick this up. So sorry, but I'll continue in a second.
I do kind of want to piggyback off of that when she talks about getting in touch with the lender. This is actually a really good opportunity for you guys to be building relationships with a strong lender. And I say a strong lender for a reason. You're going to need a lender that can think outside of the box, that knows their loan programs and can help educate you and your buyers on these loan programs. Because when I got licensed, it was a buyer's market, and that's really what set me apart, is because I made sure to know my loan programs, and the lender that I spent that time with was willing to educate me on that. Like, they're going to have to start hustling for their money too. Like, during the seller's market, it was just a matter of getting people approved. And if they weren't approved, we were so busy that they had to move on to the next one. There was no real nurturing. And it's an unfortunate thing because there's a lot of good people out there who deserve to be nurtured. But that's just what the market was. Now they're in a position where they're going to have to nurture. They're going to have to spend the time with these buyers and think outside of the box, whether it's a little bit of credit repair, buying down their debt, getting gifted funds from a family member, or pulling from their 401k or their IRA. There's so many different tactics that these buyers may not be aware of that the lender is going to help you overcome those challenges. Is anybody familiar with gifted funds or had to experience that yet?
Yes.
Angela, you're muted. Unmute you, babe. I can hear you now. So
I said I haven't had to use it, but I'm familiar with what it is. I'm glad people are using the gifted funds now. Because at one point they weren't really using it. So I'm glad the lenders have those programs.
yeah. So just to kind of touch base on what gifted funds are, what that means to a buyer, what that means to a lender, and what kind of paperwork you guys are going to have in line, because conversation is going to be key, right? As soon as you talk to a buyer and you start talking about money, what do? They clam up. They're like, I don't want you looking at my finances. So when you start talking about gifted funds, not only are you going to be looking at their finances, not you specifically, but the lender is going to need to look at the finances of the person who's gifting that money. So if your buyer knows they're going to buy, but they know they're a couple months out, if they could get that gifted funds like 3 months in advance, it has time to sit in their account and mature. So then you don't have to necessarily explain it later with a lender why that money is there, because that lender is only going 3 months back anyways, as far as bank statements are concerned. But who wants to actually sit there and give the money up front and let it mature for a while? Like me as a parent, if I'm trying to gift my kids money so that they can buy a house later, I'm going to be worried that they're going to spend it if it's in their account when it's intended for that. And I understand that a lot of people might feel the same way. So what they have to be then prepared for is showing their bank statements where the money existed in their account and then where it shows the money withdrawal, and then it no longer exists in the account. And then your buyers are going to have to show the same thing. They're going to have to show that that money transferred from that account was deposited into their account and that it reflects that. Then they're also going to need what is called a gift letter or a gifted letter, where the person who gave the money has to write a letter stating, I gave so-and-so this much amount. It is not to be repaid because it is supposed to be technically gifted. Now, if your buyers is technically borrowing that money, they need to have that conversation on the sideline, and it does not necessarily need to be privy to the lender, because then they're going to have to count that as debt. That's where we get kind of in the gray area, and you have to decide or help your buyer decide what's best for them in the long run. If they're borrowing a substantial amount of money and there's interest built on it, and like it's a secondary loan, that's going to be a different circumstances than them borrowing money from their family member and paying it back when they can pay back. Like, that's their personal business. So you don't want to get too much into it as far as that goes, but they have to understand paper wise, it's gifted funds. Does that make sense for everybody? And now we're actually going to start seeing closing costs or closing concessions provided to the buyer by the seller. Does everybody understand what that means? I know in the seller's market.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Yep.
yeah. I've been getting that already. So definitely.
Yes. And so when we talk about what the closing costs can actually cover, again, this is going to depend on the buyer's type of loan and what the lender allows. So another conversation that you're going to have with a lender. But this can cover anything from the actual closing costs to get the loan closed, as well as buying down points, as well as debt reduction. So what that means is you could potentially have the seller pay for the buyer to get a lower interest rate, which will save them thousands of dollars over the term of the loan, and make their monthly mortgage payment something a little bit more affordable. And that could be something as simple as 1 or 2% of the actual sales price. So we're talking like $2 to $4 grand. If it's a $200,000 price point, that could be like $50 to $100 difference in their mortgage payment, if not more. And stretched out over a 30-year program can actually save them several thousands of dollars in the long run. And when we're moving into this market, we'll see that the people who are buying or selling are actually serious sellers and serious buyers. In the seller's market, they were like, well, maybe I can get this money for it. Or, the interest rates are so good, I can't turn this down. Like, I can afford a more expensive house at this price point with this interest rate. So when you're moving into a buyer's market, you're going to see the mindset is different, because these are people who do need to buy and people who do need to sell. So you're going to really have to hone in on those whys to help motivate it. So when you're representing a seller who needs to sell a house, you're gonna tackle in on those things. You're gonna tackle in on condition of the property, because it's still going to be the best property sells the fastest, right? So if you're in an inventory where your neighborhood's got 10 other houses that are the same, like your square footage is the same, you got the same amount of bedrooms, the same amount of bathrooms, those finishes, those little extras, that's really what's going to set it apart. You're going to start seeing carpet allowance or painting.
See that.
Yeah, you're going to see people leaving stuff behind, like a hot tub, or there's going to be a lot more included with the house. So it's going to balance out that interest rate. But getting those closing costs is really going to be what's going to help out these lower income families be able to buy. Yes, they are buying at a higher interest rate, but they are going to move into a market where they are very close to actually zero down. Whether it's a VA buyer or a USDA buyer or VHDA buyer, where they have that grant program that covers their down payment, their only expenses that they're going to put out is their EMD, which they'll get back, the cost of their home inspection, and then the cost of their appraisal. They won't have to cover their closing costs. They won't have a down payment. And a lot of times you're going to see them get money back like their earnest money deposit. Like,
what? I'm buying a house now, And so I've been looking at homes, and first of all, the beauty of it is some of these homes have been on the market like 69 days, down $20,000. So what I plan on doing is I'm definitely gonna ask for the seller concessions, and I'm gonna ask for points
Yeah.
to lower my monthly because of my DTI. So I'm gonna have to ask for the points to lower that. So yeah, that it's a good time. It's for those of us that's taking the time to look.
Yeah. And it's going to take that communication that you have with either your sellers or with the listing agent if you're representing the buyers, understanding the needs of the sellers and what they're willing to do, and how educated they are on their option as well. I can't say this enough, that the amount of education that you guys are getting with our brokerage, you're not going to get at another brokerage. Like, how many brokers are taking the time out to make sure that you guys understand the market, understand the different programs out there. Like, this information, you can pretty much guarantee there's a lot of agents out there that don't know it. So you have an advantage, which is going to set you apart in all markets, including this one as well. But understanding what the seller is willing to give is really going to help leverage your buyer's ability to buy, because you're going to be able to get them the sun, moon, and stars, and they're going to be a lot happier with their homes. We're starting to see a lot of buyer's remorse with these properties that they bought in a seller's market, because they paid a lot. They drew their savings, and now they're like, this isn't even really the house that I wanted. And they're going to see it shift, and they're going to see houses come on the market that at a higher interest rate they could have had, and it would have been a lot more of what they wanted. So it's going to be a give and take, and we just really want to make sure that we're focusing in on our clients and their needs and making sure that we're hitting those expectations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that actually does hold a lot of value, because what you were saying is, especially when it comes to selling, like when there was those low interest rates, I'm just going to take the chance and sell it just to see if I get a good buck on my return. Now, like you said, the sellers are more serious sellers, the buyers are more serious buyers. So the ones that are selling actually hold value in their home. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to sell those individuals, to make them sell their houses now, because those houses have value to them now. And they might not get as much as they were going to get when those interest rates were lower. So they're going to be a little bit more hesitant to sell those houses. So now it's up to us to educate them on what's the benefits of selling your houses, and making sure we understand their needs and not forcing them to sell their house. Because once you get to that stage where you feel like you're forcing them to sell their house, you're not going to sell the house anymore.
Exactly. And one of the tactics that they talk about in this book is called trading up. So you are moving into a larger home or a better school system, better neighborhood, whatever it is, and you see it that way. So like, even though you're taking the loss on the sell, you're going to gain that loss on the buy, because you will see that you're saving more money buying higher than you are at selling a little bit lower. Does that make sense? They have a diagram for it. Let me locate that diagram so I'm not lying to you. If you look at page, for anybody that has their book in front of them, if you look at page 189, excuse me, just flip it over to 190. It's got a little small diagram. It says your smaller home, you sell at 200,000, you sell at 190, which is a 10%, $10,000 less than what you were going to sell it for. And then a home price at 400, you buy it at 380, and then you're saving 20,000. So you're actually, that $10,000 loss, and you still gain $10,000 in savings if you math it out. So just by explaining that to people, like, not only are you moving into a house that you want, but your long-term savings are there. Like, you're taking a $10,000 loss here, so you can get a $20,000 gain there. And people who have bought houses before love the numbers. But here's another tactic that you can explain to your clients if they can afford to hold on to both houses. Like, if they're eligible to buy without selling the other house, they could potentially rent out the other house and get that residual income and wait for the market to shift into a selling market, and then be able to profit on both sides, buy low in a buyer's market and sell in a seller's market. But not everybody's got the finances to be able to do that. So it's just one of those things that you're going to have to negotiate. I've had buyers that were buying into a bigger house. They were 100% financing. They were using their VA, but they had a house. So we rented it out. We had a lease in place to show that they were going to have it leased out. And that's all the lender needed at that time, was the lease agreement showing that they were going to do it, and a copy of the deposit that they were moving in, and then moved them into the other house. So it took away that debt to income, and they didn't have any down payment. So it allowed them to buy the other one. We got closing cost concessions. So now they have a rental property and a personal property where they were upsizing, basically, to allow them to make that move. So these are going to be, you know, tactics and options that you're going to be able to use. And it's going to be really, really good for your VA buyers and sellers. If they can afford to hold on to the property, which the rental market is still absolutely crazy, right? I have a listing that went live in Williamsburg on Friday, and the apartments that are in the same association, the apartments that are located in there, are renting for $2,900 a month. That's bananas. I could not imagine paying that much. I don't pay that much in my mortgage. My mortgage is like half that. So I don't like, so these people, they can absolutely afford a house, and then they can afford to rent it out and possibly turn profit, because their mortgage shouldn't be that high.
I was just going to add that, like, also, because I think that was a technique or strategy I either learned from you or Chrissy. I can't remember, but I told a client, I'm like, I understand you might want a house right now, but maybe a house might not be feasible. But I gave them the idea of, you might want to look into, you got some nice townhouses and condos in like the Virginia Beach, Chesapeake area. You might be able to get into that for like a year or two. And you might not even need to sell that when you look for a house. You might be able to rent that out and make profit while you're looking for a house and get your house. And you can keep your townhouse and condo and continue to make profit off that and use a little bit of change to help you pay your mortgage too as well. So, you know, there's pros and cons, I guess.
Yeah, Samantha says she says that all the time. So she's quite familiar with that tactic. And I'm pretty sure I told her that tactic years ago when she first got to our brokerage as well.
Yeah, so that maybe she gave it to me when I was her mentee. So yeah, I remember getting it from one of you.
Yeah. Yep, Samantha says you did. Yeah, so. But this is always going to be something that you just pitch. It may not be the right fit for your clients. This is why this buyer consultation, I cannot stress this enough. This is no longer going to be meeting them at the house. You're going to actually have to set up an appointment, plan out an hour of your day, and really hone in on what your buyer's needs and wants are, and then talking to them about, you know, representation and stuff like that, because you're going to see a different change in clientele. You're going to see people who don't have as big as savings as what they did in a seller's market, but you're still going to make money. You know, like, I don't want y'all to think just because they don't have this money saved up that they're not a qualified buyer. They absolutely are. They just did not have the head start advantage of having a significant savings. Now, when it comes into tapping into like their 401k or their IRA, these are things that are actually allowed within their program to take that money out. So if they've been paying into their 401k for the last 10 to 15 years with their job, they could have a substantial amount of money that could help them cover their down payment. Let's say they don't qualify for USDA or VHDA, and then they need to have their down payment. They could pull it from there. Now, they do need to understand that they have to do they have to deal with the taxes of it or whatever, so they need to understand what that means. So talking to an accountant, and hold on guys, my son still wants to fix my computer, so I don't want him to barge in here. There we go. I'm glad he's like tech savvy, because I don't know why my volume isn't working on my speakers aren't working on my laptop for some reason, but that doesn't matter. But they need to understand the tax repercussions for doing this, but again, this is going to give them the money that they may need for that down payment, and it is typically allowed by the 401k or the IRA to pull that money out without penalty. They'll just have to pay the taxes on it. Now, as we start to see the inventory climb, more houses on the market for longer time, this is when you guys are really going to have buyers that are going to have a hard time making a decision. They're going to see all of these houses that could fit their needs, but they're going to have a hard time. I'm actually experiencing this with some of my buyers right now. Like I took them to see 6 houses yesterday, and then we're seeing 3 more today. And, you know, it's fine because I want them to find the house that they want, but we're starting to look at a lot of the exact same house over and over again. So it's making it hard for them to really narrow down and make a decision. So again, when you guys get ready to like meet with your clients, if you have like a handful of houses that may meet their needs, it's good to try to like sort it out and narrow it down in the beginning, really understanding their criteria. If they want to be in a certain area because of the schools or whatever the case may be, but they see a house that looks really nice that's outside of that, but there's also several houses available that meets the same criteria, you need to go ahead and have a nice conversation with them and help them understand that even though that house is nice, it's not in the area that they wanted. So they can change the house, the condition of the house and the overall look of the house, but they can't change the location. And sometimes having that conversation with them, but like, look, I understand this house is nicer, but are you really going to be happy being in this neighborhood, in this school zone, when you can be over here and potentially make this house look like this? And sometimes that side-by-side comparison, when you just break it down, but like, guys, we're talking about stainless steel appliance package and granite countertops and some paint. Like, are you really wanting to sacrifice the neighborhood for that comfort when you could eventually do that within your own home? Sometimes they can do that within a few years with the equity in their home. So like it gives them something to look forward to and to be able to add their personal touches. But you really want to try to make sure that you help your buyers narrow down what they're looking for, because if they are open-minded and they're willing to consider several different areas, several different cities, you put a lot of miles in your car, a lot of wear and tear, and they're going to get into this tunnel vision fog thing where they can't see the light and they don't know how to make a decision, and then they get fed up and then they quit shopping. And we don't want that. We want them to be happy, but we don't want them to get so worked up over everything that they can no longer make a decision. Does that make sense? How many houses have y'all been taking your buyers to see so far? I know that not in the seller's market, in the current market, because the seller's market was different. Like it was there and it was gone. So it's just, it is what it is. You're lucky if you got in to see it. Anybody working with buyers right now?
I mean, I'm still just doing like 2 or 3 maybe, but I think my buyers also just, you know, like for the most part, what cities they're looking for.
Yes,
but the market,
right?
yeah. But prior to like the seller's market, I remember specifically that I had one buyer. We were looking in Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, Suffolk, like drove everywhere and all sorts of different houses. By the end of the day, I was so tired. I'm like, you guys have got to pick, you know, the city that you want, and then pick the neighborhood you want in that city. Like, we got to narrow this down. It's just too back and forth. I like, you know, and then what I started doing too, I was a lot newer then, but what I started doing too was, okay, what did you like about this house? What didn't you like about this house? And like comparing it to the other ones we saw. So in that way, when we went back out the next day, I was like, okay, so because when we were pulling out listings, I'm like, okay, well, you didn't like this at this other house. Like, you didn't like that it didn't have a second bathroom. You didn't like that it didn't have a garage. So we're going to eliminate these other ones because they didn't have those things. There's no point in seeing them. And that made it a lot easier and a lot less wasted gas.
Exactly. And in reality, you want to encourage your buyers to start narrow because they can always expand their search afterwards. So if they start narrow and then they realize they're not getting what they need, then they can start to expand. Like, where are we willing to compromise? Is it on the neighborhood? Is it on whether or not we have a garage? Is it on whether or not we have 4 bedrooms? And that way it keeps them more focused on what they're looking for and not being overwhelmed with seeing everything that meets their expectations, honestly. So you just want to help navigate that and keep that constant communication. And what Samantha's tactic is like keeping record of what they're seeing and what they like and dislike is really going to help you in the long run, because I put a lot of miles on my Civic. I can honestly tell you that. Like, since I bought it and what she's going through now, like she's getting ready to hit 200 very soon, and I bought her at 60,000 4 years ago. So she's been through it. It's a lot of miles. Now, it talks about finding the best buy and getting it while the getting is good, right? So knowing what your client wants, you take them into the house, it meets all of their expectations or 90% of them, right? Like the closest that you've been so far. And to you, this is the perfect house. Everything that y'all discussed met their expectations. They walk in, they love the house, but they're not ready to pull the trigger yet. They're like, well, what if something better comes on the market? And then you have that conversation with them before you even leave the house, honestly. Like maybe not in the house if there's cameras or whatever, but you have that conversation with them. If you guys walk away and do not write on this house that has met all your expectations, right? Here's your list of the wants and needs that we went through, and we have checked off all of these, and y'all still want to wait, and you walk away to see if something else pops up, and this house goes under contract. How are you going to feel? What is that going to mean to you? Like, what kind of regrets are you going to carry over into every house that you see after this? Because we can't guarantee that another house just like this one is going to become available. I can guarantee you all day there'll be more houses. Whether or not it's going to be the house that you're actually looking for and wanting is a different story. And 9 times out of 10, you say that and you execute it right, they're going to want to go ahead and write on that offer. You're going to want to make sure that you're getting them the best deal so that they can't say no. This is the neighborhood that you wanted. These are the amount of bedrooms. It's move-in ready like you wanted. It's got the yard like you wanted. It's already fenced in. Like you were literally just going to move in and get your furniture together. The seller is offering to cover your closing costs. Like, what other expectations are you or do you have that we're not meeting? Like, where are the real hesitations? And having that conversation is really going to go a long ways, because they can't say no. They're not going to have a reasonable. And if they still say no, are they serious buyers? Are they really wanting to buy, or are they waiting?
And with somebody like that, you honestly really just have to be honest. And I think that was like my fear in the beginning, but I'm like, you know what? You really have to just be honest with some of these people. And to me, the way I see it, you walk into a car dealership, you know you're looking for a car. Like you just didn't just walk into this car dealership. Like, okay, some people do just walk into some car dealership and just be like, hey, I'm just looking, I'm just window shopping. But majority of the people know, like, look, I need a car and I'm coming in to look at a car.
Right.
So you're out house shopping, you know you're ready, you're looking for a home, and you just have to explain to them, I know it's nerve-wracking. You got to be honest. Tell them, yes, this is nerve-wracking. Buying a house is very nerve-wracking. It might be the highest or biggest purchase you're ever going to make in your life. So I could understand you're hesitant, but this checks off most of your boxes, almost all of it. And there's no guarantee you're going to find something like this again in your price range. And now you might miss out and you might be sitting again. And I don't know if these people might be renting. So again, you might have to wait another year to rent. You're going to have to rent out for a whole nother year, and you're going to be missing out on houses that you guys probably already, liked already. That was your dream home, but you were just too hesitant to pull the trigger. So sometimes you just got to give them that Spartan kick into the pit so they can write that offer.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up signing a lease agreement for a whole nother year, because so when we move into this next section is talking about different areas for creative financing, which could be what the seller can do, what the buyer can do, and what the lender can do. We've talked a little bit about what the buyer can do as far as 401ks, IRAs, talked a little bit about what sellers can do as far as closing costs. But what some of you may not be aware of is sellers can give money towards a lease break fee as long as the loan allows it. And VA loans typically allow it, a lease break fee. So basically, if your client is in a lease and you look at the terms of the agreement, what it costs them to get out. Now, there are some leases that are very strict and require for the full lease to be paid out. Like, that's a wash. I wouldn't even, there's no point. But there are some that only require a 60-day notice and a penalty, which is usually like 1 or 2 months worth of rent. So they still have to pay their rent for those couple of months that they're for the 60-day notice, but then they pay an additional 1 to 2 months of rent. And in the closing cost concessions, you can also include a lease break fee as long as the lender allows it. I cannot tell you how many buyers I helped buy a house using that tactic because I was able to get them out of their lease. So
that's really on point, because one is waiting to the end of the year because the lease is up in January. So that's an excellent strategy to see whether or not we can work on that. Because first of all, you can wait till last minute anyway. I'm not last minute person, but that's excellent. Thanks for that. I forgot about that lease back.
yep, just to have them look over their lease to see what the clause is for early termination. A lot of times, if they're dealing with the private seller directly, they could negotiate it and let them out of lease early. Because remember, the rent rates are still high. So if they're locked into a lease agreement where they're paying a lower rent and the seller can actually get more money, they might be more willing to let them out. And so you just got to kind of start thinking outside of the box. How can I make this a win-win for everybody so that we can get this deal done? Yeah, because them rent prices are ridiculous. So there's some things that they discuss in this book that I have not had the experience with. So I'm not sure if our lenders actually do that or if our state allows it. But one of the things they talk about is seller funded permanent buy down or temporary buy down. So this is where they go to buy down the points or they buy down the rates. I'm not sure if it's actually allowed. Maybe Angela, you've already talked to somebody about buying down the rates, whether or not our state or our loan programs allow it here. Owner financing. So this is going to be like where you kind of get into the rent to owns. I have not had the privilege of dealing with one directly, but basically if a seller owns the house outright, then they can choose to basically be the bank. They can choose to do interest rates and set that up, and you can help them navigate that as well. So there is, the benefit of getting commission off of it, but it's definitely something an attorney needs to be involved in. Go ahead, Angela. She had to go, so I didn't know if she was trying to tell me something or just had to run away. So it's definitely something that you would want to really get involved with an attorney to help get that drafted. Now, they could do a rent to own program where they are renting for a year to get their ducks in a row for financing, and then they're going to go ahead and achieve a loan and pay off the seller at that point as well. So that's always an option and opportunity, but you would really want to have clear, concise conversations and a plan of action for the clients and for the lenders so that we know exactly how we're executing this. So like if a buyer is not that far away from actually qualifying, here's the risk that they run. We have no idea what those interest rates are going to look like. So the same time that they're paying rent, we need to see that there's a contract in place showing that the sales price is not going to increase, that this is the agreed upon amount and the agreed upon amount that they're going to be financing, because the seller may want to, like if the market shifts into a seller's market, the seller may want to go ahead and list at a higher price versus, honoring what the agreement was for the buyer. So you want to make sure that all of those terms are written out and understood by everybody, because everybody needs to understand this is the reason why we're doing it, and they can go in there with a nice clean conscience and nobody can try to screw the other person over later. So wraparound and assumable mortgage. So an assumable mortgage, first of all, you have to make sure the loan program allows it, and that's FHA and VA. They have to qualify for that type of loan program. And basically what they would be doing is taking on the seller's interest rate that they have and paying off what is left of the loan. The problem with that is it's not really a win for the seller, nor is it a win for the finance company. So the finance company, the mortgage broker, they have to be okay with that, with the loan being assumable, because they're not getting anything extra out of it. They're having to sit there and sell this loan to somebody at a lower interest rate than what is currently on the market. And then on top of that, they're only paying off what's left of the loan. So if your clients, your sellers have been in there for 20 years or 10 years, like, they're selling it for less than what the house is actually worth. So you're either going to negotiate a cash offer on top of that to pay the difference, or they're taking a loss. So I haven't done any of those ever, so I'm not too familiar with them, but from my understanding, you would really want to make sure that it's a good fit for your seller. And typically that means your seller is in a position to where they can't afford the house and they don't qualify for a short sale. So they need to make some adjustments to see how they can get out from underneath their house and put them in a position to where they can move on with their lives. And then it might be a win-win and a benefit to a buyer at that point. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I was gonna say, I'm assuming by y'all silence, yes. So the lender, when you're talking to different lenders about the programs that they might have, there are some lenders that are running programs to where they can do like a buy down rate program where it's like a second mortgage or whatever, not really a second mortgage, but another type of loan on it, or something to help cover their down payment. Not all programs are grants. Some of them are just like a separate mortgage, secondary mortgage to cover the down payment. So just communicating with your lenders to really understand what it is that they can do for buyers, because we are going to be getting a lot more creative in trying to help our clients get qualified and get them the right home. But I'm not going to touch too much into it because it's definitely a conversation we should have with the lender. So let's move forward. The book really goes into detail about what the lender can do, but I feel like we should really, it's good to read it over and then have conversations with our local lenders to see if it's something that they offer. So let's talk a little bit about short sales, foreclosures, and REOs. So especially Samantha, she works with a lot of investors. As our market shifts, we may start seeing these a lot more of these come available. I know after the market crashed in 2008, we absolutely saw a lot. Whether or not we're going to have the same because of COVID or whatever the case may be, I honestly don't know. Our market is different than it was then. There wasn't a lot of restrictions and guidelines to keep things in check. There wasn't a lot of checks and balances for the way they were doing financing back in those days. So that's why the market crashed the way that it crashed. There's a lot more restrictions and stipulations for getting qualified to buy a loan or buy a home these days. So I don't think we're going to see it in the same sense, but it's still good to understand the process and how these things work, because you are still going to find sellers who have had financial hardship that requires them to either short sell their property or they end up getting foreclosed on. Some of those hardships could be somebody within their family getting ill and no longer able to work. It could be divorce. It just, there's a whole lot of things that could happen that literally just changes their financial structure for their home. So for those of you who don't know, a short sale is basically selling the property short of what is owed on the property, meaning the value of the property is less than the actual loan amount. So if we bought a house at $250,000 and we've had it for 3 years and we still owe $225,000 on it, but its current market value and its current condition is only going to drive about $200,000, then you would pursue a short sale. A short sale is always involved with an attorney. Like, you never want to try to navigate a short sale yourself. You're really not equipped to even begin to negotiate those, because basically what happens is we put it on the market for, if we're trying to hit 200, right? We know that that's what it's going to sell for. So you're going to put it on the market for hopefully a little less than that, and try to get prices to drive it up to try to see if we can hit that 200 mark. Once you have a contract, the attorney then takes that contract and begins negotiations with the bank to see if the bank will accept a lesser amount. Just because the bank accepts a lesser amount doesn't automatically excuse the borrower from that price difference as well. So they could still be responsible for the difference, but hopefully the attorney can get it negotiated out to where they don't. The process is very long and time consuming. Most of the people that are buying short sales are people that can afford to have their money tied up, depending on how much is required down. Most of the time it's still just like a standard earnest money deposit. But a short sale is not going to be an opportunity for your first time buyers, simply because they have to move. Like, they're ready and to buy now, and waiting 6 months for the bank to come back and counter at a higher price or refuse the short sale altogether. Plus, you're always at risk of it foreclosing at any given time. Short sales are usually always as is sales because the seller has no money, and so they can't afford to do any repairs. So, making sure it's going to pass the loan type, like VA and FHA, they're not typically buying short sales simply because the property usually does need some extensive repair that won't pass the appraisal. Not saying that you won't find them, I'm just saying they're few and far apart. Successfully closing a short sale can be very good for your cash investors because they have the opportunity to buy a house at less than market value, and fix it up and turn around and flip it and make it a decent amount of money. But where you still have to consider their ARV afterwards. So like, if the house is in need of repairs, like, they still need to make profit. So if the house is only worth 200 and it needs about $50,000 worth of repair work, most investors aren't going to want to pay 180 because that's too tight on their numbers. They're going to want to pay somewhere closer to 100, maybe even less than that. So just understanding your investor's bottom line and what the needs of the seller are, how close it is to foreclosure, all of these things are going to come into play when your clients are actually considered a short sale. Anybody have any questions about those? They're fun. Now, a bank can always refuse, for when the market started shifting out of the buyer's market into a seller's market, we saw a lot of banks refusing to sell for less than the actual market value. So the property, like, I had a condo that was only worth $72,000 at the time that we were trying to short sell it. When she bought it in the inflated market, she paid, like, I want to say $135,000 or something along those lines. She bought it for way more than what it was actually worth. And so when we were attempting to short sell it, it was I think it was like a $30,000 difference. So I think she still owed like around $100,000. So we were attempting to get it short sold and for less than 72, because we're trying to appeal to an investor at that point, because it did need updating and stuff like that. It wasn't in bad shape. It just needed cosmetic updating. But the bank refused to sell it for less than 72,000. They came back and that's what they told us. So whoever was going to be buying into it was going to have to pay actual market value, and the loss that the bank was taking was the loss on the bad loan, basically. So some of them are a pain in the butt to deal with because every financial institute is different on how they handle short sales too. Some of them are very willing to negotiate and some of them aren't willing to negotiate at all. So if you're going to do a short sale, make sure you have an attorney because they're a pain in the butt. And foreclosures just mean that, you know, it foreclosed on, you didn't get it short sold. So at that point, depending on what the bank wants to do with it, they could auction it off. They could put it on the market. It could become REO, basically just means that they own the property. The idea is the bank never really wants to own property. They want to own them. They want to own the money. They don't want to own the actual property. So selling an REO is going to be a great opportunity for like your clients to really get into a property that for cheaper, because at that point they really do want to offload the property because now they own it and there's nothing they can do with it except for sell it. So it will create opportunities for your buyers to possibly get a good deal. Again, they're not going to want to do any repairs. It's very rare that I've seen a bank sit there and put the money into it to repair it, to bring it up to market value. It's really going to have to make financial sense for them in order to do that. But most of the time it is usually as is sell. So like that's your cash investors, or, you know, your hard money lenders, or your clients who are looking to get into investment properties themselves with, you know, a conventional loan, stuff like that. It may not pass a VA or an FHA appraisal standard. So you always want to keep that in mind when you're walking into these properties. Make sense?
Yes. It's, with the foreclosures too, isn't it that they don't, or is it just auctions? I'm not sure. But isn't it true that you keep, like, they don't technically do the same kind of disclosures as they would as a traditional sale as well?
Correct. They are not required to issue a D4. They have no knowledge of the property, so therefore they're not required to disclose anything.
So I would just, like, with that being said, guys, I would just be aware, looking at properties, make sure you do a lot of due diligence on those properties.
Your due diligence is key. Now, if a property is being auctioned off, there's a good chance that you don't have the opportunity to really do a due diligence. It just depends on, because like I said, all of them do it differently, right? So sometimes they will put out the list ahead of time of what's becoming available for auction, and you'll have the opportunity to preview the property ahead of time. It will be a rat race. There'll be a lot of investors in there, so it's good to be prepared mentally with what you're looking for, like having checklists to walk through the property, to be able to easily identify what things need to be repaired, as well as understanding your budget, your costs for fixing it, whether or not you're going to go to a full rehab, whether or not you're doing high end, medium, or low end. Like all of these things you're going to need to have before you can walk the property, because your opportunity to actually inspect this property is not going to exist at an auction. Once you buy it, you buy it. There is no home inspection at that point. Like that bad boy is yours. So when it's listed through an actual agent, you may have those contingencies in place, but again, money talks, and people with cash with a smaller close date is really going to be what wins the deal. Make sense? Wow, I'm taking your silence as yes. That's actually pretty much all I had for today. So hopefully that gives you guys some good, strong insight. I would suggest definitely taking the time to study your buyer consultation, really polish that bad boy, make time to meet with a lender if you haven't yet, get coffee, pick their brain, come prepared with questions so that you understand the different loan types. Really start to ask, how can we get these people qualified, give them different scenarios, so that you can be prepared with thinking out of the box. And if you have buyers who are close and really want to buy, like those are the best ones to work with, because it's just going to take a little bit of effort on everybody to get it worked out. And you guys will be able to be the rock star in their life. You'll forever be their hero.
I just wanted to, because I didn't get a chance to before.
Yeah.
So with the lenders too, I ask, especially when we're talking about refinancing in the future, because obviously rates are really, they're starting to get really high right now.
Yes.
A conversation one of my lenders is having, one of them, so Caliber Home Loans doesn't resell their loans. They, I can't think of the word right now, but they service them for the whole life. So what they'll do is they'll watch the loans for your clients. And when it gets to a point where the rate is low enough that they believe that it's worth it, and if it's been within a year, it won't cost them very much at all to refinance with Caliber. But if it's been over a year, even still, like they'll take care of your client to make sure they get their rate lowered, save on their payment. So when you're talking to these buyers and they're worried about these rates, make sure you have a lender that, it doesn't have to be someone that services, but make sure they have a lender that's, you know, hey, I'm going to take care of your client from here on out. Make sure that they, you know, because people forget after a while, or they don't know about rates and things like that. Have somebody in your back pocket that you can sell that says, you know, I'm going to watch this. I'll help you with your refinance in a year or so when the rates start to come back down a little bit. You know, that'll ease their mind to know, okay, the worst is right now. It's going to get better in a year or so, and it'll just make their investment so much better. So just something else to think about. And if you guys, anyone needs their contact information, I give that to you too.
Yeah, exactly, because they always have the opportunity to potentially refinance later. So, and the rates could continue to go up. So you can't really stress that enough. We don't have a crystal ball. We just know that the market is a constant roller coaster. So stay in tune with your buyer, stay in tune with your lender, and let's go sell some houses. All right, bye everybody.
See ya.
Appreciate you.